Look at me when I'm talking to you. You better start telling me where you were tonight, or you are in serious trouble.
That night was too damn quiet. The kind of silence that makes you hear your own heart before you even realize you're scared. Street light flickering above, bugs humming, a cheap liquor store sign buzzing red against the dark. Then came those blue lights, spinning like the end of the world in slow motion. Officer Ryan Sullivan pulled up on Marcus Jackson like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole career. The kind of cop who walked with that puffed-up chest, jaw tight, hand already halfway to his holster before he even said a word. Marcus sat behind the wheel of his old black Chevy, windows rolled down, hands visible, engine quiet. He knew the drill. Too many brothers learned it the hard way. No sudden moves. Speak calm. Keep your voice steady, even when your pulse feels like it's trying to break free from your ribs. Ryan leaned in, flashlight slicing through the car like he was searching for a reason to be scared. "License and registration," he said. Same flat tone, no eye contact. Marcus nodded. Polite, respectful, trained. "Yes, officer. My wallet's in my jacket. I'm reaching for it slowly." He even said it out loud, step by step, like a man reciting instructions to stay alive. But to Ryan, it didn't matter. He saw what he wanted to see. In that split second, his eyes didn't see a veteran, a Marine, a husband heading home. They saw a black man moving too slow, talking too calm, sounding too sure. You people always think the rules don't apply to you. Until they do. That's what he said, calm as prayer, before his finger squeezed. One shot. It echoed like thunder cracking through bone. Marcus jerked back. Air punched from his lungs. His Marine-trained grip instinctively trying to steady himself, to survive. But it wasn't war. It wasn't combat. It was home. His home. The place he fought for. The place that never fought for him. His wife, Sophia, screamed from the passenger seat, voice trembling somewhere between rage and disbelief. He didn't do anything. He's showing you his ID. He's a Marine. But Ryan wasn't listening. His brain had already built its defense. He reached for something. They always say that. The line rehearsed so many times, it rolls off the tongue smoother than apology ever could. The dash cam caught everything. Marcus's hand moving slow, the ID visible between his fingers. His words cut short by the pop that followed. And after the shot, the world went quiet again. The kind of quiet you can't wash off. Ryan's hand shook slightly, then steadied as he holstered his gun, eyes darting between Marcus's still body and Sophia's trembling hands. He whispered something, maybe a curse, maybe regret, but his face stayed blank, like he was still convincing himself he did what he had to. Sophia pressed her hands against Marcus's chest, crying, yelling, calling his name, begging someone to help. The street was empty. The only sound left was the hum of the dash cam still recording, the red light blinking like a heartbeat that refused to stop. When the sirens finally came, they came too late. Backup officers surrounded the scene, one of them pulling Sophia away, another muttering, "Stay back, ma'am." She fought them, screaming his name, "Marcus! Marcus, stay with me!" But his body was already still, his dog tags cold against her palms. Ryan tried to stand tall, but his face had gone pale. He didn't know, he couldn't know, that the man he just shot wasn't just some random civilian. Marcus Jackson was a decorated U.S. Marine, a man who'd carried his brothers out of burning trucks in Afghanistan, a man who'd been saluted in D.C. just 2 years ago for valor. The same hands that once held rifles to protect this country were now covered in his own blood, in the same country that saw him as nothing but another threat. But that night, justice didn't pull up, just paperwork did. Officers whispered, supervisors took notes, and the chief showed up hours later with that same tired look cops wear. When they already know the story, they'll tell the press. We're still gathering facts. Preliminary investigation. The suspect reached suddenly. That's the script. Same one used in too many towns with too many names written in chalk. Sophia sat on the curb, covered in his blood, the streetlight flickering over her face, her body shaking not just from grief, but from realization. She'd watched her husband fight a war overseas, but she never thought he'd lose one here. And as the ambulance rolled in, it wasn't carrying hope. It was carrying protocol. Marcus was gone before they lifted him. The medics knew it. They covered his body carefully, tucked the dog tags into a bag. Ryan turned away when they did. The sound of that zipper closing was louder than the shot itself. Neighbors came out from their porches, phones up, faces pale, whispers spreading fast. They shot a Marine? One woman gasped. He was a vet. He lived 2 streets down. The whole block started to stir. Cameras recording, voices rising. But the department moved fast. They pushed the crowd back, marked off the area, controlled the narrative before truth had time to breathe. And through all that chaos, the one thing Ryan Sullivan didn't realize, he just put a bullet in a man whose name would echo all the way up the chain. Because Marcus Jackson wasn't invisible. He had people. He had brothers still in uniform, commanders who remembered his name, medals sitting in Pentagon files. Within hours, calls were being made, quiet but urgent. Someone up high had seen the footage. The Pentagon was about to step in, not because they wanted to, but because this time America had shot one of its own. By sunrise, the whole block looked like a movie set nobody wanted to be in. Yellow tape, flashing lights, news vans creeping in slow, like vultures smelling the truth before it's cold. Piter SPD had already released a quick, polished statement. An officer-involved shooting occurred late last night following a routine traffic stop. The suspect appeared non-compliant and reached for an unidentified object. That's how they word it every damn time. Nice and sterile. Like death sounds better when it's dressed up in fancy sentences. They called Marcus a suspect before his body was even cold. The report didn't mention that he was a decorated Marine, didn't mention the folded flag in his home office, or the 3 tours he did overseas while that same cop was still learning how to shoot at a paper target. Nah, to them, he was just another incident. But word travels faster than lies, especially when the truth's got video. By 9 a.m., the dashcam footage had leaked. 32 seconds that broke the internet in half. It showed Marcus reaching slow, calm, voice steady as he said, "My ID's in my jacket, sir." It showed Ryan's hand trembling before the shot, then tightening, his face unreadable, but cold as steel. It showed Sophia's scream, the chaos, the silence that followed. You could hear it, the kind of silence that don't need captions. When that clip hit Twitter, everything changed. The world saw it. Vets, activists, soldiers still overseas watching from dusty bases, shaking their heads in disgust. That man served his country, one comment read, and his country repaid him with a bullet. The Pentagon noticed too. At first, just whispers in morning briefings, a few colonels trading side-eyes over coffee. Then the name Marcus Jackson got passed up the chain. Somebody remembered. The commendation, the ceremony in D.C. 2 years back. The photo of him shaking hands with a general under the same flag that now draped his coffin. That's when it stopped being a local matter. Quietly, A call went out, no press, no noise, just a command. The Department of Defense was watching Pinterest. Meanwhile, back in the city, Sophia was drowning in interviews and noise. Every camera wanted her tears. Every reporter wanted that one soundbite that would go viral. How do you feel? What kind of question is that to a woman who just watched her husband die? She wasn't built for attention. She was built for loyalty, the kind of love that don't end when the body stops breathing. So she sat there, trembling, a Marine's wife turned widow overnight, repeating the same words. He told him he was a Marine. He told him. Her voice cracked every time. The more she said it, the angrier she got. Because it didn't matter to them. Ryan didn't care who Marcus was. That badge gave him a god complex, the kind that lets you rewrite reality and call it procedure. Inside Pinterest PD, they were panicking. Internal Affairs was trying to figure out how to spin it. The chief called an emergency meeting. Same lines, same lies. We'll investigate internally. Let's not rush to judgment. But everybody knew what that meant. Bury the file, blame the victim, stall the press. But this time, they underestimated who they were messing with. The Pentagon doesn't wait for updates. They dig, they uncover, and they were about to pull that department apart piece by piece. By the second day, national media picked it up. Every major outlet ran the same headline. Decorated Black Marine killed in police shooting. Military officials demand answers. And just like that, the story stopped being about one bad cop. It became about a broken system. Retired generals went on TV, shaking their heads in disbelief. This man wore the uniform, one said, and yet, at home, his skin became a target. Hashtags started trending. Hashtag Justice for Marcus. Hashtag Veterans of Color. Hashtag He Served Too. The nation was split again, half screaming for justice, half defending the thin blue line. But deep down, everyone knew. The video spoke louder than excuses ever could. 3 days later, the Pentagon made their move. No warning, no leaks. A convoy rolled into Pinterest. Black SUVs, tinted windows, a silence that made cops shift uncomfortably in their boots. They weren't there for revenge. They were there for presence, for message. A Marine honor guard marched through the station parking lot, crisp uniforms, boots echoing against the concrete. The same sound Marcus once made when he was alive, in formation. People froze. Cameras rolled. That image alone hit every news channel before noon. Uniformed Marines saluting a man shot by his own country's police. That visual spoke louder than any statement could. It said, "You don't get to bury this one quietly." Officer Ryan Sullivan tried to hide behind legal counsel. "I feared for my life," he said in the official report. The oldest line in the book, but the Pentagon didn't care for excuses. They wanted facts. They demanded all footage, all body cam logs, dispatch recordings, the whole 9 yards. And when they reviewed it, the truth was too clear. There was no threat. There was no reach. Just racism in motion, wrapped in a uniform. Sophia sat in the front row during the funeral, surrounded by Marines who'd fought beside her husband. One by one, they saluted the coffin draped in the flag. Ryan wasn't there. He was on paid administrative leave. The department called it standard procedure. The Pentagon called it cowardice. When they folded that flag and handed it to Sophia, her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. She just whispered, "He served for this flag. Don't you dare let it cover lies." And the cameras caught it. Millions watched her words. Millions felt that truth hit deep. By the end of that week, Marcus Jackson's name had become a movement. Protests lit up coast to coast, vets marching alongside civilians demanding reform. Every speech, every march echoed the same phrase: he served this country failed him. And while the Pentagon couldn't arrest the cop, their presence made the country look in the mirror. Every uniformed man standing at that funeral was a question America didn't know how to answer. By week 2, the world had stopped pretending this was just another incident. Pinehurst PD tried to patch their cracks with press conferences and polished lies, but you can't hide rot when the smell's already out. Reporters started digging, veterans started talking, and someone inside the department finally snapped. An anonymous email hit a journalist's inbox. Internal files, complaint records, and dashcam timestamps that didn't match the official police report. Turns out, Officer Ryan Sullivan had a history. 3 previous stops where his gut feeling always seemed to involve young black men. 2 complaints dismissed, 1 lost in review. They called it procedural error, but everyone knew what that really meant: protection by the badge. And just like that, the story went from tragedy to scandal. Pinehurst PD wasn't dealing with a PR nightmare anymore. They were facing exposure. National outlets ran it non-stop. Pattern of bias found in Pinehurst Police Department. Whistleblower alleges cover-up. The whole country was watching now, and the Pentagon's silence was starting to feel like pressure. They weren't talking, but their quiet presence said everything. We see you. Sophia had stopped sleeping by then. Every night, she'd sit in their living room surrounded by medals and photos. Marcus in uniform, laughing with his squad, holding the flag he swore meant something. She'd watch old videos on her phone, his voice playing like a ghost through the speakers. "If anything ever happens to me," he once joked, "make sure they spell my name right on the news." She laughed then. She cried now. The same media that once ignored stories like hers was now knocking on her door daily. They wanted more tears, more anger, more sound bites. But Sophia wasn't crying anymore. She was fighting. With the help of a lawyer, she filed a federal lawsuit. Wrongful death, racial discrimination, and obstruction of justice. The legal system hated cases like these. Too loud, too messy, too real. But Sophia didn't care. She wasn't looking for a settlement. She was looking for change. The chief of Pinehurst PD gave another statement on live TV, voice rehearsed, tie too tight. "We take this matter very seriously," he said. But his eyes darted off camera when a reporter shouted, "Why wasn't Officer Sullivan suspended after his previous complaints?" He froze. The mic caught the silence before the commercial break did. Social media lit up instantly. Memes, clips, call-outs. The cop had no idea who he shot, became more than a thumbnail. It became a slogan for the movement. Protest signs, murals, hashtags, t-shirts. The story of one man became the mirror for a nation that keeps saying never again, while watching it happen again and again. Inside City Hall, panic spread faster than truth. Emails got deleted, hard drives got misplaced, and a few officers suddenly went on medical leave. But whistleblowers kept feeding info to the press. A retired officer even came forward on live TV, voice shaking. "They told us to keep the reports quiet." They said it'd ruin the department's image. The host leaned in, asked him point blank, "Why speak now?" The man's eyes watered. "Because Marcus wore that uniform better than most of us ever did. He deserved better." That clip went viral in minutes. You could feel the public shift. Anger turning into unity. Unity turning into demand. people wanted names. They wanted accountability. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. A leaked internal memo from the city's mayor's office. An order to limit cooperation with federal inquiries to avoid escalation. Translation: keep the Pentagon out. But the Pentagon was already in. Quiet investigators, unmarked suits, base connections. They were piecing it together like a battlefield debrief. The more they found, the uglier it got. False statements, tampered evidence, officers coached before interviews. It wasn't just one bad cop. It was a system running on fear and favoritism. The badge had become a shield, not for protection, but for pride. Meanwhile, Sophia's fight started turning heads in Washington. A senator, herself a veteran, called for hearings. If a Marine can't be safe in his own country, she said on live TV, then who is? The Pentagon released its first official comment. Short, sharp, devastating. The Department of Defense mourns the loss of Sergeant Marcus Jackson and supports a full, transparent investigation. One line, but it hit like an explosion. It meant the military wasn't backing away. It meant the government was split. Cops on one side, soldiers on the other. That tension made headlines for weeks. When the Pentagon stands where justice should have. The nation couldn't stop watching. Ryan Sullivan had gone into hiding by then, his name plastered everywhere. He gave one interview, sitting pale under studio lights, stuttering through excuses. I followed protocol, he said. I feared for my life. The interviewer didn't blink. From what? She asked. A man reaching for his ID? The silence that followed ended his career faster than any court ruling could. But for Sophia, that wasn't enough. She wanted laws changed, not lives ruined. If I wanted revenge, she told a reporter, I'd be praying for his pain. But I'm praying for justice, because Marcus ain't coming back. But maybe the next one will make it home. Protests grew into marches. Veterans of color filled the streets in uniform, medals on their chests, fists raised high. They marched not for pride, but for truth. News helicopters caught the aerial view. Hundreds of Marines and soldiers saluting outside courthouses. The sound of boots on concrete echoed through every broadcast. America hadn't seen that kind of unity in years. The Pentagon didn't organize it, but they didn't stop it either. Some said it felt like the military's silent protest, one salute at a time. Then came the grand jury. Weeks of testimony, hours of footage, witnesses from every corner. When the verdict dropped, it shook the country. Officer Ryan Sullivan indicted on charges of manslaughter and obstruction of justice. It wasn't enough for everyone, but it was a start. Sophia didn't cry when she heard it. She just whispered, "About time." That clip went viral too. People started saying her name like a battle cry. Sophia Jackson, the woman who made America listen. But even after all that, the Pentagon's presence never faded. They attended every court date, every public vigil, not in uniform, in silence. Just there, watching, standing for one of their own. Because Marcus Jackson wasn't just another case file. He was a message carved in reality. You can serve this country, bleed for its flag, die for its people, and still not be safe from the ones meant to protect you. They buried Marcus on a gray morning that felt like the sky itself was ashamed. Wind cut across the cemetery, hard and cold, snatching at the flags lining the path, while the crowd stood in silence. Vets, neighbors, strangers who only knew his name from the news, but felt like they'd known his story their whole lives. The Marine Honor Guard moved slow, mechanical, perfect. Every step sounding like judgment on concrete. Cameras stayed back. This moment wasn't for headlines. It was for truth. Sophia sat front row, dark glasses hiding eyes that hadn't slept in weeks. When the bugle cried, she didn't flinch. When they folded the flag and placed it in her hands, she whispered, "Don't let this be another hashtag." The general beside her nodded once, heavy and wordless. Behind them, veterans whispered prayers that didn't sound like forgiveness. That day, even the air carried guilt, like America was finally realizing the war it pretended not to fight was happening right here at home. Reporters called it a national reckoning, but to the people standing there, it felt more like déjà vu. Another name, another uniform, another promise broken. After the funeral, the story didn't fade like the others. It grew teeth. College kids painted murals of Marcus's face, his eyes half shadow, half fire. In barbershops and bus stops, folks argued loud, saying what they'd been too tired to say before. "If a Marine ain't safe, what chance we got?" one man asked, shaking his head. Churches held vigils. Vets told their own stories, how traffic stops felt like checkpoints, how salute-worthy men got treated like suspects once the uniform came off. The Pentagon kept its silence, but its presence lingered like a ghost. Every city cop knew the name Marcus Jackson now. Every chief got that memo, quiet but clear. Watch yourselves. Departments started revising training manuals overnight. Overnight. Public officials called it reform. The people called it too late. Still, change was moving, slow but visible, like a storm you can finally smell before it hits. Sophia turned her pain into movement. She launched a foundation for veterans of color, funding mental health care and legal aid. Every interview she gave hit harder than any politician's speech. "My husband fought for this country twice," she'd say. "Once overseas, once here. He only survived the first war." The quote went viral, printed on posters, repeated in protests across the nation. She didn't chase fame, it chased her. She just wanted to keep his name alive without letting it become background noise in another tragic montage. The same Pentagon officers who stood at his funeral showed up again months later at her first rally. Plain clothes, no medals, just solidarity. One of them told her quietly, "Ma'am, we don't speak for policy. We stand for respect." That line hit every heart in that park like scripture. Because respect is what Marcus never got that night, and what every black man still prays won't be the next thing stolen. Ryan Sullivan tried to disappear. New identity, new town, but you can't hide from your own face when the internet never forgets. His trial dragged for months. The jury saw the video 1,000 times. Every pause, every blink, every second between Marcus saying, "Sir," and the trigger pull. When the verdict came, guilty of manslaughter, the courtroom didn't cheer. Nobody clapped. Justice wasn't celebration. It was exhaustion. Sophia just nodded once, eyes closed, like finally exhaling a truth she'd been holding too long. Outside, reporters shoved microphones her way. "Do you feel justice was served?" one asked. She looked straight into the camera. Justice would have been him coming home that night. This is accountability. Don't confuse the two. That clip ran everywhere. For the first time, America didn't argue back. They just listened. Months rolled on. Laws changed. Departments faced audits. Marcus's name was written into a new bill on federal oversight for police misconduct. The president mentioned him during a veterans ceremony. Sergeant Marcus Jackson reminds us that service doesn't end with a uniform, and equality shouldn't either. Some called it political theater. Others called it healing. Either way, his story forced movement in a country allergic to change. And every time someone tried to twist the narrative, say it was an isolated incident or one bad cop, there'd be another voice to remind them. He said he was a Marine. That line shut rooms down, because truth don't need volume, just memory. On the anniversary of his death, Sophia stood by the memorial downtown, a bronze statue of Marcus in his dress blues, eyes forward, hands at rest. The plaque read, "He served, we remembered." Kids ran past it, vets saluted it, and strangers left flowers like promises they hoped to keep. She spoke to the crowd, her voice steady, carrying through the air like a sermon. "Marcus taught me that courage ain't about facing enemies. It's about facing your own people when they refuse to see you as one of them." The crowd went quiet. You could hear the flag ropes clinking against the pole, the heartbeat of a country still learning to listen. That night, news anchors called it closure. But there ain't no closure to a story like this. Only chapters that keep warning the next generation. Somewhere, another young black soldier drove home in silence, seeing blue lights in his rear view and feeling that same chill Marcus felt. Somewhere, another cop put his hand too quick on his holster, brain wired on stereotypes he never unlearned. And somewhere, Sophia whispered Marcus's name like a prayer against the wind, hoping the world didn't forget why he mattered. Because that's the thing about stories like his. They don't end. They echo. And in every echo is a reminder. Freedom don't mean safe, and patriotism don't guarantee protection. America loves its heroes, just not always the ones that look like Marcus Jackson. A year later, the city still wore his memory like a bruise, faded on the surface, tender underneath. Streets that once shook with chants now had tourists stop to take pictures. Kids asked their parents who he was, and for once the answers didn't hide the pain. He was a Marine, they'd say, and he was one of ours. The department tried to move on. New chief, new training videos, new slogans painted on patrol cars. Serve with honor. But everybody in that town knew honor wasn't something you paint on steel. It's something you prove in the dark when nobody's filming. The younger cops looked nervous now when they pulled someone over. Hands hovering on belts, but not reaching too fast. Body cams stayed on. Protocols got rewritten. Pinehurst became the pilot city for the new Federal Reform Act, the Jackson Initiative, funded straight out of D.C. It required mandatory bias training, psychological screenings, and automatic external reviews for any use of force. Old-timers grumbled about overreach. The new ones just called it survival. Because Marcus's story wasn't just a case, it was a warning carved in policy. Across the country, departments copied the blueprint. Police academies showed the dashcam footage in classrooms, making rookies watch every frame. The instructor would pause right before the shot and ask, "What do you see?" Some said non-compliance, others fear. But eventually, one kid would whisper, "I see bias." That was the lesson. Not the bullet, the blindness that came before it. For the first time in years, law enforcement couldn't just hide behind procedure. They had to look inside themselves. News anchors called it the Marcus effect. Some saw progress. Others called it guilt management. But it worked. Nationwide, use of force complaints dropped. Departments began partnering with community groups led by veterans of color. The same men once ignored, now teaching cops about control and humanity. The irony was poetic. Soldiers, teaching peace to those sworn to keep it. Sophia kept the foundation alive. She toured base after base, police academy after academy, standing behind podiums that still made her knees shake, but her voice never wavered. My husband wasn't a saint, she'd tell them. He was a man. But being a man shouldn't be a death sentence when you're black and breathing. Every room she entered went quiet. Cadets scribbled notes. Commanders stared at the floor. Even the toughest officers waited after her talks to shake her hand, some with tears they tried to hide. She'd smile, humble but firm, and remind them it ain't about blame. It's about fixing what's broken before it breaks someone else. The media followed her everywhere, but she didn't care about fame. She cared about momentum. Because for the first time in a long time, America wasn't just outraged, it was learning. Still, the backlash came like clockwork. Talk shows argued she was milking the tragedy. Anonymous hate letters showed up at her door. Move on, they said. But grief doesn't take orders. Every insult was proof the wound was still open, still bleeding under all that patriotic talk. Sophia learned to move through it like smoke, untouchable, unstoppable. When Congress invited her to testify during the national justice hearing, she walked in wearing Marcus's dog tags over her heart. The committee hall was packed. Senators, cameras, military brass. Her voice filled that cold room like heat. "You say you love this country," she said, "then start acting like everyone who defends it deserves to come home safe." The applause was quiet but endless. Outside, a crowd waited just to see her walk out. She didn't smile. She just nodded, mission still in motion. Back in Pinterest, Ryan Sullivan sat behind bars, serving a 10-year sentence that felt like forever to him, and like nothing to the people he hurt. Prison stripped him of rank, gun, and illusion. Word was, he kept to himself, no visitors. Some said he replayed that dashcam video every night in his head. Maybe guilt found him in the dark. Maybe it didn't. The system doesn't do closure. It does consequence. And that's all he got. The Pentagon honored Marcus posthumously with the Valor Beyond Duty Medal, the first ever awarded to a soldier killed by domestic police violence. The speech was short. No politics, just a general saying what everyone already knew. Sergeant Marcus Jackson's courage reminds us that patriotism means fighting for justice, even when the battle's at home. The room stood silent, hands over hearts, and for a second, you could almost believe the country was healing. Time moved, but the echo stayed. Netflix made a documentary, schools added his name to civil rights lessons, and protest murals turned into permanent memorials. Kids grew up knowing who Marcus was. Not just the man who got shot, but the Marine who made the system flinch. Sophia kept his story alive in every corner of the internet, every speech, every law signed with his initials. The nation began using his name as shorthand for the uncomfortable truth that even heroes aren't safe when the badge sees color before humanity. The phrase, "Remember Jackson," started appearing on banners, police pins, even tattoos. It wasn't worship. It was accountability inked into culture. And somewhere down a quiet road one night, another patrol car pulled behind a black driver. Blue lights flashed. The officer approached slow, hand near his belt. But this time, he stopped himself. He thought about the training, the stories, the videos. The name Marcus Jackson burned into every department briefing. He took a breath, lowered his voice, said, "Evening, sir. License and registration when you're ready." The man in the driver's seat nodded, calm. No panic, no shaking. The world didn't change overnight, but it shifted, just enough to matter. And that's what legacies are made of. Small shifts that save lives. They still tell his story on Memorial Day, not just for what he did overseas, but for what his death forced America to confront. Because in the end, Marcus Jackson didn't die for nothing. He became proof that truth, once seen, can't be unseen. That one man's blood can write a nation's next law. That love for your country means demanding it loves you back. The Pentagon still sends flowers every year. Sophia still visits his grave with fresh flags and a quiet smile. And the city of Pine Rest, once a name whispered with shame, now carries his initials on every cruiser door. MJ-42, his badge of honor. Not to glorify death, but to remember what it cost to make the next man think twice before pulling a trigger. 10 years later, the city looked different. Not perfect, not healed, but changed. The mural of Marcus still stood tall on the side of the old courthouse, the one they used to march past when protests filled the streets. Time had worn the paint thin, but his eyes still burned through the colors like he was watching the world he left behind. Kids who weren't even born when he died knew his name like a prayer. In school books, his story came right after Rosa, Malcolm, and George. Teachers didn't whisper it anymore. They taught it out loud. Sergeant Marcus Jackson, U.S. Marine, served his country overseas, lost his life at home. The class always went quiet after that line. Some of those kids grew up to wear the uniform too. Some joined law enforcement. Some just promised themselves they'd never let history repeat. And maybe that's what legacy really means. When your name becomes a line between what was and what won't be again. Sophia still lived in the same house. She never remarried. Said she didn't need to. I already had my forever, she'd tell reporters who still showed up every anniversary. Flowers in hand, cameras ready. The medals were still on the wall, the flag still folded in its case. But the house wasn't a shrine. It was a headquarters. Her foundation had gone international by then. The Jackson Project had chapters in 20 states, each one helping veterans of color navigate a world that still treated them like strangers in the home they fought for. The slogan said it all. He served, so we serve. Donations poured in from all over, schools, churches, even police departments that once ignored her calls. The same institutions that broke her heart were now sponsoring scholarships in her husband's name. Funny how time turns guilt into generosity. The Pentagon still sent an honor guard every May. They didn't make speeches anymore. They didn't need to. Just the sight of those soldiers standing in silence beside a black Marine's grave said everything. The world around them had changed because of the man buried beneath that stone. Federal laws bore his name, police reforms carried his initials, and every new recruit in uniform, soldier or cop, knew his story before they took their oath. The word Marcus had become code in those circles. Remember Marcus, they'd say, before field ops or patrol briefings. A reminder not to lose their humanity when adrenaline tried to erase it. But change didn't come easy. There were still nights when blue lights meant fear for too many, still towns where justice felt like a rumor. Yet even in those dark corners, his name was a spark. News stories still mentioned him whenever another headline broke. It's another Marcus moment, anchors would say, and the country would remember all over again. That's the curse and blessing of a story like his. It never fully ends. It lingers in every decision, every hesitation before a trigger pull, every lawmaker's conscience when they sign a bill. Sophia aged like the weathered side of that mural. Lines deeper, heart stronger. Every year she spoke at the National Memorial for Fallen Veterans. Her voice softer now, but sharper than ever. My husband taught me something this country still struggles to learn, she'd tell the crowd. You can't wave the flag for freedom if you're blind to who it's supposed to protect. The audience always rose to their feet, not out of politeness, but because they could feel that truth hit like thunder, quiet but undeniable. And when she stepped off stage, soldiers would salute her, not as a widow, but as a soldier herself in a different kind of war. The town of Pinehurst changed its police motto a few years back. They painted it across the station wall in bold black letters: protect, respect, remember. Every rookie had to visit Marcus's mural before graduation, part of the training now. Some said it was symbolic, others said it was healing. Either way, nobody questioned it. The town that once covered its shame in silence now carried its lesson in daylight. The mayor renamed the street where it happened Jackson Way. Tourists came from everywhere just to see it. But the locals said it best. He brought honor back to this city, even in death. 10 years can't erase pain, but it can plant new seeds. Veterans who once felt invisible now had voices. Cops who once thought fear was instinct learned that empathy saves lives too. Sophia's foundation built housing for retired service members who'd been forgotten, and every doorway carried the same plaque: for those who served, and for those still fighting to be seen. The world didn't suddenly become fair, but it became aware. And awareness is the first kind of justice this country ever needed. One night, Sophia drove out to the cemetery alone. No cameras, no crowd, just her and the sound of crickets. She sat by his headstone, ran her fingers over the carved words: Sergeant Marcus D. Jackson, beloved husband, hero, truth. She smiled, whispered, "You did it, baby. You really did." The wind moved soft through the trees like an answer. Somewhere, miles away, a young black Marine stood in formation, shoulders squared, repeating the same oath Marcus once took. And maybe that's the real victory. Not statues, not bills, not headlines, but every soul that walks safer because one man refused to be forgotten. The world Marcus built wasn't perfect, but it was better. His story became the bridge between pain and progress, the proof that even in a country that keeps breaking hearts, some hearts still beat loud enough to change it. And long after Sophia's footsteps faded down that road, long after the flags were folded and the cameras stopped recording, his name stayed, painted, printed, prayed, not as a wound anymore, but as a warning, as a promise. The promise that next time the lights flash red and blue, the man behind that badge will remember him. And the man in that car might live to tell his kids that justice finally learned how to breathe. You ever think about how fast a life can get rewritten in this country? 1 second, you're a hero. Next second, you're a suspect. That's the American remix of loyalty, where your skin tone decides whether your service still counts. Marcus Jackson didn't die in some foreign desert. He died right here, on a clean American street, under the same flag he swore to defend. And the man who shot him? He didn't see a Marine. He didn't see honor. He saw a target. Because racism don't wear hoods no more. It wears badges, titles, and excuses that sound professional enough to hide the hate. But here's the part they don't teach you. Marcus didn't just leave a headline. He left a mirror. And every time a cop stops someone, every time a soldier salutes that flag, every time a kid learns his name in class, That mirror stares right back. It asks, who are you fighting for? And who are you still afraid of? Because you can't fix a system that still denies what it is. You can't preach freedom while some folks still get punished just for existing in it. And maybe that's why his story hit different. It ain't just tragedy, it's exposure. It ripped the mask off a truth we keep burying under policy and procedure. It showed that even heroes can bleed from the same wound this country keeps pretending to heal. It showed that patriotism ain't about flags and fireworks. It's about fighting for justice when it ain't convenient. So next time you see those blue lights in your rear view, or that folded flag at a funeral, or a name trending for all the wrong reasons, remember Marcus Jackson. Remember that justice don't come from uniforms. It comes from humanity. Remember that silence ain't peace, and fear ain't safety. Because until this country learns how to see a black man as equal, not a threat, not a statistic, not a story, the war Marcus fought never really ends. He was a Marine, a husband, a name America can't afford to forget. And maybe the next time a cop reaches for his gun, he'll think of Marcus first and decide not to pull the trigger.